You're listening to The Vault. I'm Trisha Turinskis. Today's episode is based on a story out of the Duluth News-Tribune by Brielle Bredston. It's titled, How the O.J. Simpson Verdict Swayed Justice in a Minnesota Murder Case. The 1979 death of a young woman, Denise Daly, who fell from a moving grain truck in Carlton County, Minnesota, was initially thought to be a suicide or an accident. That was until an anonymous tip nearly 15 years later connected the incident to the 1983 fire that claimed the life of her sister, Mary Daly, and infant nephew, Christopher Daly, in Superior, Wisconsin. Eventually, 2 people were indicted for the murder of Denise, but the case was thrown out in 1996. No one was ever held accountable for the murders of the 3 Dalys. Their cases remain open and unsolved. Denise was 20 years old when she died. It was around 3:41 a.m. on October 16, 1979, when she tumbled from the cab of a grain truck, traveling westbound on Minnesota Highway 210. Her death was initially investigated by the Carlton County Sheriff's Office. The driver was from Bemidji, and he told authorities that Denise had been in the truck's passenger seat before she fell out. A funeral was held in Superior, and Denise was buried in the family lot in Port Wing, Wisconsin. Years later, in the early morning hours of September 23, 1983, a duplex fire in Superior, Wisconsin, claimed the life of Mary. She was 19, and her 8-month-old son, Christopher. Both of them with the last name Daly. Mary's body was found on the floor near her bed, with Christopher about 4 feet from her. He died hours later at Superior Memorial Hospital. Police determined the fire was arson. A small amount of evidence found indicated Mary was the arsonist's intended target. Mary was described as very likable, and there were no recent disputes between Mary and her friends or family. The investigator on the case said the arsonist may have been familiar with Mary's apartment unit. The back door leading to a balcony was cocked and blocked off by a dresser. Only the front door of her apartment was accessible. There was no smoke detector in her apartment. Police said Mary was getting dressed at the time of the fire, and she tried to exit the building. 2 men living downstairs escaped out of the back door of the apartment unit after one of them heard the smoke alarm go off. Jim Spencer said he and his roommate heard Mary's screams, but the fire spread too quickly for them to enter the apartment. They heard Mary break the window open in her bedroom, and then smoke poured out. He ran to a nearby 7-Eleven store to call the fire department. Fire inspectors found traces of what they believed to be gasoline spread on the outside porch, the hallway inside the door, and all the way up and inside the stairway to Mary's apartment. Superior Fire Marshal Art Morgan said the material from the fire was sent to the Wisconsin Crime Laboratory in Madison to determine if the fuel was gasoline. Police spoke several times to a man walking past the duplex just as the fire started at around 2:40 a.m. The man said he heard a loud whoosh before he was knocked to the ground by a man running down the porch steps of the house, headed north in an alley between 16th and 17th Streets. The witness described a 6-foot-tall man wearing faded blue jeans and a faded denim jacket with dark hair, not quite shoulder length. The key piece of evidence was a 5-gallon gas can found in the yard near Mary's home. It was sent to the FBI's crime lab in Washington for fingerprint analysis. Superior Police ruled the deaths of Mary and Christopher as homicides, but never had enough evidence to charge anyone. 30 people were interviewed, some multiple times. A $5,000 reward was offered by the state for information leading to the conviction of the arsonist. There were a handful of suspects, but none were confirmed to be linked to the fire. On March 23, 1985, Superior Police booked Charles William Fluge, who was 29 years old, into the Douglas County Jail on 2 counts of murder in the case of Mary and Christopher Daly. Superior Police said Fluge confessed to killing 2 people in a fire when he was called into questioning for unrelated forgery charges. Fluge said he knew Mary and offered a couple of motives for killing her. Although he signed a confession, authorities were suspicious of his involvement due to the unsolicited confession. Superior Police suggested a lie detector test was needed, and he was interviewed by a psychologist. He was not formally charged due to inconsistencies in his statement surrounding facts of the crime scene. Fluge's statements were proven false, and he was not considered a suspect in the reopened investigation following an anonymous tip given to authorities. On January 28, 1995, the Duluth News-Tribune reported Carlton County authorities received an anonymous tip from a confidential male informant that Denise was shoved from the grain truck, traveling at 50 miles an hour along Minnesota Highway 210 west of Sawyer. He also said that Mary and Christopher were probably killed because Mary knew too much about her sister's death. Police said they didn't know who else was in the truck with Denise because the sheriff's office didn't keep records when the Minnesota State Patrol handled an investigation. The patrol destroyed incident reports after 10 years, unless there was a reason to keep them. The files were destroyed because the death was originally ruled a suicide. When Carlton County officials called Superior Police for help in checking the information, the Wisconsin officers quickly linked the tip to the arson murder case of Mary and Christopher. Police believed the deaths of the Daly sisters were connected. The Carlton County Sheriff's Office, in conjunction with the Superior Police Department, reopened the investigation into the deaths of the three Dalys in October 1994. 9 investigators, including 5 from Superior, worked on the case full-time. The list of suspects and others questioned in each case had similarities. Additional information from 2 witnesses led the Carlton County Sheriff's Office to develop an artist's sketch of a man sought by investigators. In 1979, the man was described as being in his early 20s, 5 feet 9 inches to 6 feet tall, with brown shoulder-length hair. He possibly wore glasses and was wearing a belt made from motorcycle chains. Denise's body was exhumed from its Port Wing burial site in early 1995 and taken to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for an autopsy. A forensic pathologist found Denise died from an intentional blow to the base of her skull, not from a fall from a truck. The Carlton County Grand Jury convened September 18, 1995, to review evidence in the case of Denise's death. On October 3, 1995, a grand jury returned a first-degree murder indictment against Emilio Mendoza Jr., He was 40 years old at the time. Vinette Halgren Crowley was also indicted for first-degree aiding and abetting in the murder of Denise. At the time, Mendoza was already incarcerated at Oak Park Heights, Minnesota State Prison for an unrelated 1987 second-degree murder conviction for the fatal stabbing of his 19-year-old wife. Crowley was arrested in Superior and was in custody at the Douglas County Jail until she made bail. Denise had been with Mendoza at her home in Superior the night she died. According to authorities, he was the first suspect. The state alleged Mendoza inflicted head injuries on Denise in Superior and, with possible help from Crowley, transported the injured woman to Minnesota and dumped her on the roadside. Crowley's attorney said she knew nothing of it. First-degree murder charges against Mendoza and Crowley were dismissed in 1996 because of irregularities in the grand jury proceedings. The grand jury returned the indictments about 5 hours after they watched the O.J. Simpson verdict on TV at the Carlton County Courthouse. This is what the judge wrote in his decision. Both cases involved a male member of a racial minority allegedly killing a Caucasian woman with whom he was intimately involved in a brutal fit of rage. The court agrees with the defendants that O.J. Simpson's verdict and the emotions it incited injected prejudice or the appearance of prejudice into the grand jury deliberations. As a result, this event compromised the integrity of the grand jury process. The state of Minnesota unsuccessfully appealed the trial court's decision. The arson investigation continued. New evidence in the arson case surfaced in fall of 1995 that eliminated some suspects and raised questions about others, but it remains unsolved. To read this full story, head to inforum.com/thevault. Thank you for listening.